My buddy back there in the back. There we go. There we go. And I got my thing ready to go here, Joe. My slides. Oh yeah. You're not listening. You only listen to about 35% of the things I say anyway. And that's the truth, Ruth. That's but it's not because she yeah. it's not it's not because she doesn't want to. She just doesn't. She's like I heard what you got to say. I got it. I heard all that stuff. Um, okay. I'm excited. I want to get done, like I said, 10 minutes early, so we can get out there. Yeah, I'm gonna. We're getting started at a good time. The only bad thing is I don't have my watch on, so I gotta. Here's the other thing too is I got those new glasses and they already don't work, and for a good reason. Good. I won't get into all that. See, that's what I do. I remember Betty. What I was saying. I start to talk to you guys because you're all family. Yeah. That's what. Yeah. I start talking to you guys because it's fun to just interact with you. But then that adds 5-10 minutes to my message. Then everybody's like, "Yo, we got to eat." So here we go. Um, by the way, first thing I'm going to say is for those of you that look intently at the bulletins, Betty is not preaching again this week. She did a great job last week. I loved it. I'm still working things out. But I am making the bulletins, got them all done, put the little inserts in there. By the way, that insert came this week, the one for the missions. I try to get that in for Mission Sunday. So that's the other insert. But I get them all done, folded up, everything's in. Then I realized I forgot to change Betty speaking to my message for today. So she is not. So in case you're like really stuck to the bulletin, going, "What is he doing up there?" That's what happened there. Anyway, I even have it in my notes to joke about the fact that Betty's not preaching again today. Okay, so as you can see, my message title is Peace in the Mystery. We're going to talk about that a little bit today. What we talked about my last time, 2 times ago, we're in a place in Matthew where the Pharisees were clearly getting Sabbath wrong, okay? They were doing it so legalistically that they were taking something that was meant for rest and technically making it more work, right? We kind of talked about that. More rules. Uh, and Jesus had to kind of come on the scene with these guys. And remember, he said what he desires is compassion over sacrifice. We talked about that. I don't want to review too long, but that was a big deal. Compassion over sacrifice, love over law. Um, one of the things that he talked about, if you remember, he brought up. Remember, he says to the Pharisees, "Well, hey, even David took consecrated bread and fed it to his hungry guys, and y'all are okay with David." And one of the things that Jesus was alluding to was, "You guys are all about bread being what's sacred." And Jesus is trying to say it ain't the bread that's sacred, it's giving the bread to someone who's hungry is sacred. That's the idea. It's always good to do good, it's always right to do right. And so we kind of shared that last time that these guys were way off. I'll quick say one other thing that we didn't talk about last time. This is for you Bible scholars out there. One of the things that's been happening as well is Jesus is addressing a general argument that is within the Pharisaical camp or the religious leaders. They had two main rabbis that they would argue whose ideology was correct. There was Shammai and Hillel. You'll hear about those guys sometimes. We actually did talk about it here a long time ago. One of the things that Jesus is establishing is definitely more of and I don't know if this is a word, but I'm going to make it up right now, a Hillelian style. Shammai was more about that we had our responsibility. In fact, the Jews would call it that you have a yoke of obedience. That to serve God, you had a yoke of obedience. Obedience was what mattered. And so their first two laws were love God and follow the Sabbath. That was under Shammai, okay? So it was just, that's how you show God that you are faithful to him. You love him, you follow the Sabbath. That was Shammai's thing. A lot of Pharisees believed that and followed that. Hillel was more of a yoke of relationship. You'll hear that term sometimes. He was about relationship, and basically his thing was love God, love others. Obviously, that's what Christ talked about. So he would put himself sort of in that camp. So I only say that because we're going to run into times where Jesus is answering that question often. Sometimes I think that we always, because the Pharisees a couple of times would try to corner Jesus and fool him. Remember, we'll hear about times where they're asking him things, and the whole point was to kind of put him in a corner and make it hard for him to answer. They're not always doing that. Some of them are genuinely going, I want to see what camp you're in. It's one of those deals where you like solve this argument we've been having. What's the better thing? So sometimes they're asking Jesus that. That's just for you to know, because I know you dig so deep into this and you want to know that stuff. But I just wanted to throw that out there, that we didn't share that last time. Now, we talked about rest, Sabbath rest. And I suggested that the way that we can truly have that in a real sense, practical sense, is to understand better God's sovereignty, his sovereignty, that we can trust in his sovereignty. Not only that, but we can trust, we can be still, we can settle down. But the Hebrew word literally talks about settling down, being still, being calm. If you remember, I said that when we start to understand his sovereignty, we can trust him for our future, right? Obviously, we can trust him all about our future. But then we said also that we can trust him about our past, that we can technically steward our memories to God. I was talking about how what I really mean by that is that we can look at our memories, even the bad ones, through a lens of his sovereignty. It changes the way we see our past. We don't see it as, oh, this was unfair to me. This was horrible when this happened to me. Those things may have been true, because life isn't always fair, and sometimes horrible things happen to us. That's not what I'm trying to say. It's that when you look at those things through the lens of a sovereign God, you can start to believe that God can take even those things and make glory out of them. He can take any hand and win with it, in other words. So sometimes we think, oh, this hand I was dealt sort of slipped by God, and I went through a time there. It was just blah, 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 blah. And when you start to see life through sovereignty, start to trust in God, you can trust him even for your past stuff. I love that because I've had some hard stuff. I've gone through some hard stuff just like you guys have. To be able to redeem that, to be able to give that to the Lord is pretty cool. So we can trust him for our future. We can trust him with our past. And we also talked about a couple times ago that we can also trust him with everything that we see. In other words, right now we can look out at the world. You can read the news. You can look on Facebook. However you gather information. The world sometimes looks like it's a big dumpster fire. I like using that word, dumpster fire. That's what it looks like sometimes. But we said that trusting in his sovereignty, being calm, take a breath. You don't have to be angered by it. You don't have to be offended at it. As a Christian, you don't have to make it stir you. I'm not saying that those things aren't offensive, or sometimes they're not things that are anger provoking, but I can leave that anger part to God. It doesn't do the world any good for me to get angry. That's the idea. So God's sovereignty means I can trust in the future, trust in my past, and trust for everything I see. Today, we're going to talk about also being able to trust in the things I can't see. Trust in the mystery. Trust in the darkness. I'm going to be using the term darkness today. And I want you to know right now that I'm not talking about evil darkness. You know, like sometimes the Bible talks about darkness, it's talking about evil. I'm not talking about that today. We're going to talk about mystery and darkness, kind of hand in hand. Okay, I just mean the stuff we don't know about. Or the stuff that when we're going through a time we don't see we don't see the tunnel out of it, or we don't see the finish line, or whatever that might be. There are mysteries in our life. We're going to talk about that today. Now, the part of the text that we're going to be in, we're going to read Matthew. Again, we're in chapter 12. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. Just listen to me for a sec, okay? I'm going to do something today that I don't recommend, that I didn't learn in college. They would have told me that this is not the right way to do this, okay? So anybody watching on YouTube, you guys, I'm admitting that I'm going to do something here. I'm going to stretch the text a little bit. Now, here's what I mean by that. I believe the Lord has really given me a word for you guys, for us, our church. It's been confirmed by a bunch of different things. It's crazy. Even this morning, Gretchen, when you told me that the ladies just talked about this a couple weeks ago, it's like another confirmation that the Lord is wanting us to know. So what I did is I go, okay, do I just give it in a message and skip Matthew? And then I thought, well, I'll take a look at Matthew and just see where we're at and see if there's any way to kind of make it work with this. I'm being honest. That's kind of what I'm doing here. Let me show you how, okay? Because I'm going to tell you that I am stretching it. Does everybody see what I'm saying? So it's like, don't anybody get uppity about that, okay? I'm not saying that this is what we can do all the time, because this is what happens often. Pastors will take one verse and woohoo, build a whole world off of it. I'm not doing that, but I am stretching. Let's read for a moment, okay? We're in Matthew 12. I don't have it on the screen. I'll just read it. I'm only reading 4 verses this morning. Starting in verse 14 of chapter 12, it's where we ended last time I talked on Matthew, okay? It's the place where it says, the Pharisees went out and counseled together against him as to how they might destroy him. Let me pause there. That word destroy, that Greek word apollomai, I think I'm saying that right. To me, this is just my own take on this. Does anybody's translation say kill him? So some say kill him. I don't think that's a good translation. Here's why. And this is just my own 2 cents. You guys can take it or leave it, okay? That word there is more about shutting Jesus down. It's about stopping what he's doing. Now, some people go, well, ultimately that means killing him, okay? I think that gives the Pharisees, that paints the Pharisees in a light that I don't believe that they were really in. Here's what I mean by that. The Sadducees were more the rich elite rulers who got in bed with Rome. In other words, they were the ones that were kind of compromising to be closer to the government. They saw money in it. They had some money. The government had some money. They they got in bed with them, and they were absolutely defiled by that. They were, that messed up any of the integrity that they had, because they were constantly doing that. See, the Pharisees were the opposite of that. The Pharisees would have no part of Rome. That's not what they were into. They were, look, we all agree that one of their problems was legalism, right? They were so super legalistic and haughty and proud of their piety. They would have never plotted to murder. You see what I'm saying? I don't believe that they would have. Now, could I be wrong? Sure. But I just don't believe that was what they were doing here, plotting to murder. That's more like what conspiracy. That's that kind of thing. I think these guys just got together, and for the first time they were like, we got to stop this guy. We got to figure out a way to stop this guy. Now maybe they were in league with this. Some people believe that, and there are places to suggest that maybe they got with the Sanhedrin to kind of go, you guys do it. The chief priests, maybe they were kind of like, you guys do it. I'm just saying, for the sake of argument, I don't believe that they're plotting to kill Jesus, but I could be wrong. Verse 15. This is a cool one too. But Jesus, aware of this, withdrew from there, and many followed him, and he healed them all. Not just a couple of them, healed them all. That's important to me. We're not talking about this today, but we just got done, if you remember, he goes up to the place where nobody's repenting, remember? So he goes back there and he does that scathing rebuke, that Sodom and Gomorrah had it better than you guys. And I came here and you saw all my miracles, and nobody repented. If we stop the story there, right? Wouldn't we might come to the conclusion like, so Jesus stopped doing them. Like, I tried with you guys and now I'm done. I'm not doing that anymore. No, he still does them. He still does them. That gives me a little bit of insight. And again, sometimes, guys, I know that I'm answering questions you're not asking, but that gives me a little bit of insight. See, I was raised conservative, very conservative. I mean, religiously, like, theologically. I guess politically too. My dad was conservative, but what I mean by that is often from a conservative view theologically on this, usually you will hear that Jesus performed miracles for purposes like showing that he was deity, showing his divinity, proving who he was, those types of things. And the reason that they add that to that is to say that's why we don't see it anymore today. That it was only for signs, that Jesus only did it as a sign back then, and that kind of thing. Okay? That's a typical conservative argument. Okay? I went to a Bible college for 3 years and learned how to preach that before I kind of got out of that and started seeing some different things. My point is that, first of all, if that's the case, that he did it for a sign and all that kind of stuff, he failed. I mean, it was kind of a failure, especially when Jesus himself looked out and said, none of y'all are repenting. Like this, whatever sign it is, whatever I'm trying to show, nobody's getting it, right? It kind of looked like a failure at that point. But here, he continues to heal. So the sign things sort of, or at least the doing it for them to repent or see or catch who he was, goes out the door. Now, I only share this because of this. In my opinion, what we're seeing here, and again, you pay me for my opinion, but what we're seeing here is that Jesus meets needs. Jesus meets needs. You don't have to have a whole lot bigger purpose than that. He meets needs. He earns his right to speak into people's lives. Catch me? That's a huge place the church has been missing. We're good at telling people how sinful they are. We're good at telling people how wrong they are, their lifestyles are wrong. And we're not so hot at meeting people's needs. That's something that I think the Lord wants to change in his church. Now, look, that's not the church everywhere. The church does a decent job in some places, but we need to keep that on the forefront. Anyway, okay. So here's a verse I want to stretch, these two verses. And so he warns them, this is verse 16, not to make him known, in order that what was spoken through Isaiah the prophet might be fulfilled, saying, and I'm not going to keep going. This is Matthew now quoting Isaiah 42, okay? So you guys have homework to do. Everybody catching me? I want you to go home this week, at least once, maybe 2 or 3 times. Read Isaiah 41 and 42, okay? Everybody seeing me? Read it. Isaiah 41, 42. Matthew is quoting that here, saying that this is what the prophet Isaiah said, okay? This is not the same as some of the things we talked about before where Jesus remesses Old Testament stuff. This is Matthew saying, he's going back. This is Jesus, Matthew saying that he's the one that's been prophesied in Isaiah, okay? So go back and read Isaiah 41, Isaiah 42. Wrestle over why Matthew is picking this out. It's kind of interesting. I've heard lots of scholarship on this. I've read different things, commentaries, whatnot. I have some opinions on this, but to me, at the end of the day, this still is kind of an interesting thing for him to quote because it almost doesn't feel like it works with this. So I want you guys to dig into it and see what you think, and then maybe I'll share some opinions at a different time when we have more time. But here's what I want to focus on today. It's this verse, and I told you I'm going to stretch it. It's when Jesus said, when Matthew says in verse 16 that Jesus warned them not to make him known. Interesting. Here's my stretch. We know why he did that because he was already starting to perceive that the Pharisees were starting to plot, right? Okay. So that's what the text says. We could stop there. Catching me? Now I'm going to stretch. Okay? Because he's saying here, I'm going to keep the mystery alive to some degree. I don't want you all to go just doing this thing, telling about me. By the way, they do anyway, right? I mean, so we're gonna see in just, I mean, if you just look in the next column of your Bible, they're already, the Pharisees are still hanging out there. They're all still hearing the story. I mean, this doesn't happen, but the idea of Christ himself not wanting the word to go out, there's something of this mystery keeping people in the dark that I want to, again, I want to stretch out a little bit here because this is the word that I feel like the Lord's given me. And I'll move through it here quickly so we can be done early. When I was I think it was 17, 18, doesn't matter, teenager, later teens, I had a bunch of buddies get me to go what they called caving. Okay? Does anybody know the actual term for it? The technical term for it is spelunking. Have you ever heard of that? It means going into the earth, going into a hole. In Pennsylvania, there's a cave system there that's really, really narrow. You don't go there. It's not like this nice big open hole or like something in the side of a cliff that you see like in the Lord of the Rings and has a gate. It's not like that. This thing was like a hole in the ground. And when my buddies start going down into it, I'm like, where are we going? This is the cave. I'm like, are you kidding me? So we're all wearing hard hats, and it sort of looked like this. Okay? Yeah, so this wasn't just like a tourist attraction you walk through and go, oh, look at that, and oh, look at that. No, you're crawling like that, okay? Now, if you notice, he's got a little light, okay? This is so you remember. There we go. All right? Now, I got a hard hat on, a hard shell of a hat with a light, and we're crawling all over. Now, I'm with 5 guys. 2 of them had been through this cave system a lot, so they knew their way around, thank God. One guy that was there had been there once and kind of knew. Me and another guy never been in this before. Okay, I only went because it was peer pressure. This scared me spitless. Okay, I was scared the entire time. It was horrifying. Okay, but I'm being the tough guy, being with my buddies. So we're going all these places. They have these opened up caverns where they call them different things. And then we went into a place they called the box. The box, you had to crawl that tightly through about 8 feet of a hole that was like that, and it opened up into a little room that was just about enough room for 6 guys. The ceiling part of it was probably only about 4 feet high, so you'd sit against the wall. But what made it interesting, the reason they called it a box, is because the walls seemed like they'd almost been cut out, like perfectly square. Really strange. And all these people, we'd always, I guess lots of people would do this. They go and they sit in there, probably take foreign objects and different things and get induced by chemicals and different things. My buddies, we're all good Christian guys. We didn't do any of that. But we're all sitting there and we're just talking. And then it was customary to everybody at the same time turn your lights out. And then it looked like this. That's actually a slide, by the way. Okay? It gets so dark. Has anybody been in that kind of darkness? Right? I call it that this kind of darkness has a paralyzing effect to it. Your eyes are fighting. You don't realize it. The lenses in your eyes, the way they work is with light. That's how you see. If you take all of that away, you can't see at all. And your eyes are fighting to even just like any glimmer of any kind of light source at all, just to try to make sense of the room. When it's not there, you just feel like it is crazy. It feels like things shrink in on you, and it literally has like a paralyzing effect. You can't move. You're afraid to move. You're just kind of, where do you go? Like, you certainly wouldn't get up and start walking. Like, it just stops you. It stops you. Now, I put that silly thing on my head, and I use that as an illustration, this paralyzing effect of darkness. Because look, guys, we have a problem, okay? We have a problem. God seems interested in establishing, improving, developing our faith and trust over just what we know. In other words, what I believe is that God is more interested in your trust than your intellect, than just teaching you things to know. He cares more about your trust. He'd rather you have trust and not know much about anything, as long as you trust it. He'd rather that than you be super smart, super intellectual, have your doctorate degree in something. Like, that stuff is not impressive to God. I say it's a problem because if God's that into it, He does things in your life to try to get you to that area of a better trust, a stronger faith. Sometimes it means putting us in the dark. Look, He doesn't do it as a tease. I want you to know that. He doesn't do it as a tease. It's just because He knows what He knows, and He knows what you don't know, and He knows what you can't know. Okay? Right? There are times when we ask for things from God that I just wonder how many times God goes, I could tell you, but you're just going to be that much more confused. Like, you're just going to be that much more lost. Don't even, that's not the right question to ask, right? My favorite illustration of this. I want you to think like if you're taking a bunch of kids that have never been or seen anything about Disney World. My parents saved up money when I was in middle school to take us to Disney World. And we drove there to save a little bit of money. We drove there. And so as a kid, impatient kid, I'm doing the whole like, the car's hot and I'm hungry and my sister's bothering me and we think we got a flat on the way. It's like a flat. And I started complaining like it's just better to be at home and all. And my mom and dad knew where we were going. And I loved it. I used to say this to our young adults all the time, that this life, this journey we're on, is the trip to Disney World. But God, like, how does a parent explain to a kid about Disney World when they have no idea? They have no clue that where they're going is going to be so much fun for them. They have no idea. Some parents are just tempted to kind of go, well, you just shut up, right? Just shut up back there, right? You just endure it and we'll get there and we're going to have more fun than you could possibly imagine, right? Sometimes I think God does that sometimes. Will you just be quiet, right? Good parents, sometimes they'll encourage you a little bit. Oh, wait till you see with your first roller coaster, right? Or wait till you have that first. I remember one of the things about Disney World is all the food seemed like it was the best food I've ever had. Every meal was like, oh, this is the best spaghetti I've ever had. Oh, this is the best steak I've ever had. I just remember it was just so fun. And so sometimes I may be a good parent, and when they know that their kids are starting to get a little bit rumbly, maybe we'll say stuff like, hey, boy, wait till I take you on Space Mountain. Wait till I take you here. Wait till you go on your first roller coaster. Even knowing that if a kid's never seen it or been there, they're going to kind of go, yeah, okay, that sounds kind of good, but whatever. Right? Like we do. When God tries to get us excited about His plans, His promises, where we're headed, and we kind of have no clue. But we kind of go, okay, God, yeah, all right, cool, whatever. Or maybe a good parent will be like, hey, kids, let's sing a song. Let's sing a song. Get their minds off of stuff. Let's sing a song. And they start singing like we just did here because we're on a trip, right? Sometimes I just think our songs are just like, hey, we're on a trip. We're getting bored. We're getting frustrated. It's hot. We're getting mad at each other. Let's sing some songs. Sometimes I just think that's what worship music is. We're on a trip to Disney World. We're getting bored. We're getting tired. This is not an easy trip. This is a journey. And so sometimes we just got to sing. Like, just sing some songs. Remind us that where we're headed is so good. I mean, it's such a good illustration, I think. But I appreciate, like, the parental side of it, of just being like, you kids are clueless. If you just knew, you wouldn't even complain at all, probably. You wouldn't complain at all. I wonder how much God deals with that with us. Um, I want to read you some quotes here. These are some of the things that got me into this mode of feeling like I was getting a really good word here. This first one's from Bill Johnson. Um, it's so funny because I don't really listen to Bill Johnson's messages. I just follow him on Instagram, and he just every once in a while they'll post these little snippets of his messages, and half the time they're so brilliant. I can't like I just and that's the way this one was. If you follow him, you might have even heard it. He says mystery is as important as revelation, and this is what he goes on to say. Mystery is as important as revelation because mystery is where trust is proven, and the life of faith and the life of trust is more than just believing for a breakthrough. You hear that? The life of the life of trust is more than just believing for a breakthrough. Part of it's that. Sometimes, and I would add most of the times, the life of faith is to endure something you can't explain and don't have control over, and both facets of that kind of faith. So, in other words, both facets, believing for breakthroughs and enduring through unexplainable or even staying calm in the dark. Both of those facets are essential. In fact, there isn't this thing called maturity apart from that element of trust in the mystery. In the mystery. I think that's brilliant. I really do. Um, at times, sometimes when we're in the mystery, in the darkness, that times when we don't feel like we're getting an answer that we want or whatever, it can tend to feel a little bit like we're abandoned. Sometimes there's that alone feeling, like I'm not getting the answers. I feel kind of abandoned. I'm reading a book right now called The Sin of Certainty, and one of the things Pete Enns says about this, I'm going to quote him a couple times today. Feeling abandoned by God may make us more like Jesus than when things are floating along swimmingly. Isn't that interesting? Jesus would cry from the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? Sometimes when we feel that, we feel it in our heart, that actually puts us more in line sometimes with what Jesus felt than when everything's just fine all the time. I hate to admit it, but I'm probably at my weakest with my faith and my trust when everything's just going just fine. I tend to just start heading down that road and enjoying it, and I'm bad with that. Sometimes God just needs to flat out, like, like I don't know if this is true or not, but they say like a rescue swimmer when they're trying to rescue somebody who's drowning and somebody's flailing, that they knock them out. Sometimes they have to knock them out to save their own life. Is that true? Does anybody know that, by the way? I feel like that's true. I anyway, doesn't matter. Yeah, sometimes God, I feel like he needs just like I'm flailing, and he just needs to go, okay, just to save my life. Sometimes he needs to do that with us. And sometimes it makes us feel abandoned, but technically, it's what we need. Look, mystery can serve to prove our faith, and the dark can serve to help us find the real Him. Some of you may have heard of St. John of the Cross. He wrote a very famous poem. I would suggest you read it. It doesn't really have a name, but it mentions a dark night of the soul, and so people call it the Dark Night of the Soul. Has anybody heard that poem? Really incredible poem. I was going to read it today, but I didn't think we had enough time. But this quote I want to read you again from Pete Enns is from this, and I don't have it up here. Just listen. St. John's insight, talking about this poem, was that the dark night of the soul is a special sign of God's presence. Our false God is being stripped away. Our false God is being stripped away, and we are left empty, with none of those familiar ideas of God that we create to prop us up. The dark night takes away the background noise we have created in our lives in order to prepare us to actually hear God's voice. Sometimes it's in that dark when we are finally calm. We can't make our decisions on our own. That's when we can maybe hear Him. We can hear Him. Look, it's not, I want to make this clear. It's not that He enjoys making us go through these tough times. He doesn't, it's not that he enjoys us. He just knows that often it's where we get our clarity. And I want to say this too. I'm not saying that every trial or dark time in your life means that you've been in a horrible place or that you've been wrong. That's not what I'm trying to say this morning. It doesn't always mean that. But don't you think it still would be it would be good to stop and be quiet and listen just in case? Right? Just in case I was in a bad place. You know what I mean? I'm not going to tell you all of you are in a bad place. But when we're in that dark time, in that mysterious time, if we just, those are the times we stop, pause, listen. It could be just that God put us there just so we would do that. Just so we would do that. So look, here we're getting close now. God, this is important. God is not nearly as interested in revealing to us all the answers as he is in revealing himself. You catching that today? He's into trust, and he is glorious. He is glorious. And I'll go so far as to say he's never interested, never in restoring our sense and need of self-control. Sometimes we're praying for things like, Lord, show me, right? Show me this, show me that. In fact, last couple of weeks, I even said at Bible study, like, hey, maybe we need to pray more. Lord, open my eyes to this, open my eyes to this. And so it's funny that I feel like the Lord landed this in my lap because I think the Lord was saying to me, that's good, Dan, but I'm not going to just show you the things you're asking me to show you so you can feel like you're back in control again. I'm not going to do that. Oh, man, that's tough to hear, right? I don't believe that God does that just so that you feel like, okay, I'm back in control. I'm heading again. And then when I start to swerve and go out of control again, God, you can rescue me again. That's not what God's into. It's not what he's into. God can do more with your surrender than you can do with your own control. We need to remember that. We need to remember that. This is not our prayers often. We just need to be convicted about it, realize often our prayers are just simply, Lord, help me get back into control. Instead of, Lord, help me submit to your control. Help me submit. Here's another quote by Pete Enns. This one's up there. The darkness does us a favor by exposing control as an illusion. Where can I regain control ceases being the question, becoming, Lord, help me let go of control and help me trust. God is more interested in you trusting in him. Look, I know this could be a shocker. He's more interested in you trusting him than you being doctrinally correct about everything. I know a lot of people that are probably real close to being doctrinally correct about 90% of the stuff they believe. They don't have any trust. In fact, the more doctrinally correct I think they get, and the more they study, the more they trust in that knowledge. Right? Man, that's tough for me because I'm a little bit heady. I'm a little bit, I like coming from that intellectual stuff. And the Lord just constantly, to me, just going, you're too dumb to know that. That's why when we were singing today, and I was literally singing and feeling like an ant. That's why I was like, it threw me off for a second because I was like, why am I picturing ants right now? And there was sort of this idea of like, well, the ants don't question anything. They're just good with what they're doing. They don't, yeah. Anyway, I'm not going down that road, or we're going to be here forever. Look, let's start wrapping up. I want to get back to this idea of the paralyzing effect of darkness. It's not, if you're in it, you're in the mystery, you're in the unknown. Like, Lord, I have no idea why you're allowing me to go through this, or why this person's going through. I don't understand. How many times have we prayed that? I prayed that so many times. Lord, I don't understand. And God just sits back and goes, yep, I'm okay with that. I've had times where I absolutely know the Lord is going, yeah, I'm just glad you're bringing it to me. I've had times where the Lord just goes, I'm just glad you're here. Like literally, like I'm just glad you're here, me and him. And I'm sitting there frustrated. I'm like, I don't understand this. And I'm about to fail. I've told the Lord, I'm about to fail right in front of you. I've told that to him. I've had prayers where I'm going, I'm about to screw up so bad right in front of you, Lord. I need you to rescue me. And the Lord just sits back and goes, I'm just glad you're here talking to me. Like, I'm like, come on, give me something. I've had that so many times, you guys. So many times. And he's not just playing with me, because here's the thing, and this is really, it's not meant to leave us paralyzed. The darkness, the mystery. Okay? That's what I want you to hear as we end this. That's our enemy's goal, right? Our enemy wants you paralyzed. Our enemy wants you so frustrated that you'll give up, or that you just try to find answers, so that you try to trust in yourself and your own knowledge, those types of. That's what the enemy's into. The enemy loves when we just go, you know what? I tried God out for a while. He wasn't answering my questions, and so I'm going to move on to other things. The enemy loves that. God's not interested in keeping us in that state of darkness to be paralyzed. It's meant to clean the slate of all of that stuff that we have built up, that stuff, that false stuff that we just kind of go, this is what I'm hanging on to. This is the trust I'm hanging on to. I've had to let go of so many things like that. You know, this is a Pentecostal church. I believe we've even talked about this in the past. Some of it even is just even letting go of like that faith has to mean miracles. No, sometimes faith means that you trust Him and walk in Him when you don't see the miracle. In fact, it often means that more. Like it changes the way it's just, God, you be God. I'm going to let you be God. And I'm going to stop telling you what to do. It's meant to clean our slate of preconceptions, of familiar ideas about God, and specifically our need to control, which keeps things in our grasp and shrinks things down. When you're in control, it means the situation must be small enough for you to hold on to it. That's not my God. That's not what He's into. We got to stop seeing these dark times, these mysterious times, as times where He forsook us or something. Here's another thing that just 2 days ago, I'm listening to Tim Keller, and he's talking about Jonah. And he talks about Jonah gets the word, go to Nineveh, right? What does Jonah do? Goes the exact opposite way. So he doesn't just say no, God. He literally goes the opposite way. Ends up where? In a boat, right? Storm comes. I don't know about you guys, but often I've looked at that storm as some sort of a punishment by God. Okay, well, if you're going to go that way, I'm going to punish you with this storm. Tim Keller talks about it as a rescue from God. I never saw it that way before. God rescues Jonah. He goes after Jonah. He chases Jonah. He doesn't just let Jonah run off. He chases him and stops him. And then where does Jonah end up? In a fish for 3 days in the dark. I imagine it was pretty dark in a fish. And whether he liked it or not, Jonah has a book. He's got a book. It's in my Bible. I read it, and I don't know that he likes it so well. I don't think he likes it, but that's fine. He's got a book. Anyway. Okay. Here's where we're going to conclude. I want you to hear this. Unfortunately, it can take sometimes confusing times and dark times of our souls to bring clarity. Unfortunately, at least it is that way for me. I don't know about you. God so desires for us to see Him that He will often take away all obstacles to seeing Him. Sometimes that's going to look like severe loss. Sometimes you guys know what I'm talking about. But here's the idea. He doesn't leave you in the dark. The light's coming. The light's coming. I want to finish with reading you 4 verses and we're done. This first one. 2 Corinthians 4:6. For the God who has said, light shall shine out of the darkness, is the one who has shone in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Christ. The knowledge of what? The glory of God, of Him. Ephesians 5:8. For you were formerly darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. He never intends to keep you in the dark, guys. You catching this? And then the last section. This is from Romans 13, 11, and 12. This is 11. And this do, knowing the time, that it is already the hour for you to awaken from sleep. For now salvation is nearer to us than when we believed. How many people can say, thank God? Hallelujah for that. The night is almost gone, and the day is at hand. Let us therefore lay aside the deeds of darkness and put on the armor of light. Guys, we can trust Him for our future. We can trust Him for our past. We can trust Him with everything that we see. And we can trust Him with the things we don't see. You getting the idea that we can trust Him? That's what He wants to develop in us. Let's pray. Father, thank you for this. Father, will you help us just to continue to walk in patterns of trust, Lord, in just the things that we throw up our hands and say we don't understand. Help us to see those times as not negative. Sometimes those are good. Lord, sometimes it's just good that we we don't get all that. I wonder sometimes just how much you spare us from things that we would never understand anyway. All I can say, Lord, is will you help us trust you more? Will you help us trust you more? And we'll just keep plugging away.